All right, you're live. You may begin.
Welcome, everyone. This is the City of Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission regular meeting on Wednesday, February 17th, 2021. Can we have a roll call of commission members?
Certainly. This is Tim Connor. I'll do the roll call. Chair Lazar.
Here.
Vice Chair Coletta.
Present.
Commissioner Branovic has not joined us yet. Commissioner Bossi. She is here.
She's probably on mute.
Yeah, I think she's on mute. Okay, well, let me move on. Commissioner Johnson has not joined us yet. And Commissioner Kukulik has not joined us yet. Commissioner Schlosser.
Here.
We do have a quorum.
Bossie's here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. So we have a packed agenda. So this is Chair Crispin Lazar, and we have, I think we should just go ahead and hit the ground running and get on with it. Our first agenda item is approval of our meeting minutes. I hope everyone had a chance to look at that before the meeting. Did anyone have any concerns?
Make a motion that their minutes are approved from the January meeting. This is Tammy. Commissioner Bossi.
Commissioner Steve Schlosser, I second.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we go ahead and have a roll call vote on approval of the regular meeting minutes?
Yes, certainly. This is Tim Connor again. Chair Crispin Lazar.
Approval.
Vice Chair Coletta.
Approved.
Commissioner Bossi.
Approved.
Commissioner Schlosser.
Approved.
Great.
That's great.
We are approved for our meeting minutes. Our next item is a presentation. We have some guests here today. We have staff coming to talk to us a little bit about the general plan 2035. Is it Adam Yaron, correct?
Chair Lazar, that's correct. It's Adam Yaron. Yep. Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm not sure if you're seeing it on your end, but I just want to recognize it looks like you had Commissioner Branovic join the meeting.
Noted. Commissioner Branovic is on the meeting, if we can note that.
Great. Thank you very much. Chair Lazar, Vice Chair Coletta, this is Adam Yaron. I'm Principal Planner with Long Range Planning. I'll be presenting tonight, this evening, the draft Scottsdale General Plan 2035 update process. And with respect to that process, I'll just briefly cover what the update process entails. We'll go over what a general plan is and is not. Specific to a general plan, it's a community vision or city policy document. It entails community-wide goals. It guides decisions and future decisions at that. It's legally mandated. It provides a framework for more specific planning and establishes the mixture location of land uses throughout the community. A general plan is not a zoning, rigid, or static document. It doesn't provide any specific budget line items or specific project information. It's not just a master plan. And although a lot of folks generally associate a general plan with a land use map, it is not solely the land use map or the land use element. Next slide, please. With respect to the general plan update process, as required by Arizona state statutes, it's required under ARS 9-46105, in that the general plan is effective up to 10 years and is required to be updated every 10 years through enhanced public outreach, planning commission recommendation and hearing, a city council adoption process, and ultimately a voter ratification process. The last time the general plan was adopted by city council was in October of 2001 and ratified by public vote in March of 2002. Next slide, please. As required by state statute, we tried updating the general plan in an effort that culminated between 2009 and 2011 with a 19-member general plan working group, which had one person from each respective board and commission. There was extensive citywide public outreach. There was a 2011 draft plan that included content retained from the O1 process, but also added new state statute required elements to that effort. That plan was adopted by council in October of 2011. Next slide, please. And following that adoption, it went to the voters. Unfortunately, it went to the voters during a special election in March of 2012 and failed by a margin of 2%. Notably, that special election yielded just about a 19% overall voter turnout. And so with it not passing, the 2001 general plan remained in effect. Next slide, please. So following that process, we continued on with trying to update the plan between 2012 and 2014 with a vision that started with a visioning town hall representing essentially the three geographies of the city, north, central, south, with over 100 citizens equally distributed. It also included a council appointed 25-member task force that had 32 public meetings, just like the one we're having right now, pandemic accepting. They were in-person meetings. But as part of that process, the new elements created by the 2014 task force included the arts, culture, and creative community element, as well as the healthy community element. In addition to that, there was a carryover of new state statute required elements. And notably, that process included the extensive citywide public outreach, which included numerous workshops which covered planned content and review, ongoing online engagement, and meetings with individuals and community groups. Notably, this effort retained content from the 2001 and 2011 efforts. It did go through the public outreach process, however, did not go through the public hearing process with council and voter consideration, as there were still some outstanding discussions related to visioning, as well as some competing bond issues that we wanted as a city to move forward. And so, next slide, please. We all came to you back in early 2020 to ask for a citizen review committee appointment from boards and commissions that had general plan related content. The Scottsdale Environmental Advisory Commission was one of those hearing bodies. This commission did nominate Commissioner Ryan Johnson to serve on behalf of the commission, and Commissioner Johnson was gracious in providing full attendance to his time on the commission. And we had a series of meetings that we'll cover in our next slide, please. The Citizen Review Committee process included, as I stated, a 13-member committee that had 13 public meetings between April and December of 2020. They completed their charge earnestly on time during COVID restrictions. They were respectful of previous task force work, public comments received. They reviewed the entire draft plan and considered all public comments received, which were more than 300, and took final action on the plan in December of 2020. And while I know this commission likely has met in person, the CRC never met in person as a result of the pandemic. And as you can imagine, to discuss such broad and citywide initiatives, this group did a great job in as I said, finishing their task on time, so as to comply with state statute requirements. And as you can imagine, the facilitation of such a effort really required the time and effort from all parties, committee members and staff alike in that process. The public outreach included ongoing online engagement, meetings with individuals and community groups, and a vast majority of those comments received by the commission were at the very end of the process. And when I say at the very end, I mean the last meeting. There were more than 200 comments submitted, in which there was a marathon meeting effort that ran more than 6.5 hours, to which every public comment that was submitted was reviewed by the CRC process and committee. Next slide, please. So the process and timeline for the general plan update shows that we're essentially in the phase 4 part of the process, which includes the public outreach and state required adoption process, which will take place between the first and second quarter of 2021. Should council adopt the draft plan in June, we'll move forward into phase 5, which will be the consideration of voter ratification in November of 2021. Next slide, please. Now, this slide presents generally a legend, if you will, of how these legislative edits were brought forward within the plan. And you may have all had a chance to review those items within your agenda, with materials provided in your agenda packets. But text in blue were comments that were provided by the CRC as modifications to the plan. Text in green was city staff or technical advisory committee input. Text in red included citizen outreach that was collected between the 2014 and 2020 process. Items that were indicated with a new includes content that was created by the GP task force of 2014. And any item that had a double plus sign indicates those items that were required based on state required content. Next slide, please. In terms of draft plan organization, this plan is crafted into 3 different sections covering 8 chapters and distributed over 23 elements. 17 of those elements are state mandated elements and 6 are community created elements. 3 of those elements are new to the general plan, which include the arts, culture, and creative community element, the healthy community element, and the tourism element. Notably, the CRC created the tourism element out of this latest update effort. And I'll also say while I'm on the side that the environment chapter was renamed as the sustainability and environment chapter, as the CRC felt that all elements within the environment chapter relate to sustainability. Next slide, please. Now, as we move into covering the environmental chapter and its content, this chapter focuses on environmental resources and open spaces. And as I stated, includes 5 state mandated elements, which include open space, environmental planning, conservation, water resources, and energy. Next slide, please. The open space element recognizes Scottsdale as stewards of parks and open spaces. And as required by the state statute, this element includes an inventory of open spaces, an analysis of forecasted needs and policies on managing and protecting open space areas, as well as resource implementation strategies to acquire additional open space and further establish recreational resources. Next slide, please. This spread presents the open space element introduction, to which you'll note there was no revision brought forward by the CRC. And as I stated, we'll be covering notable items that were modified or brought forward through public comment. Next slide, please. This spread presents the first series of goals related to open space and their supporting policies. Notably, there wasn't any significant input or alteration brought forward by the CRC. That would be, again, that content of text in blue. Next slide, please. This spread presents, again, a series of additional open space goals and policies, as well as on the left side of the screen on page 96, identifies a series of roadway typologies that enhance the unique image and aesthetic of major streets through open space buffering and their associated typologies. So that would be that color block in green. Next slide, please. This slide presents additional goals and policies associated with the open space element. As you'll note, again, no significant change brought forward by the CRC with respect to these associated goals and policies. Next slide, please. On this spread, there were some specific input that was provided on behalf of the Environmental Advisory Commission related to policies OS 7.5 and 7.7, which are new to the plan, and they speak directly to enhancing trees and shade in the city's parks and recreation facilities and increasing trees and shade in public areas, as well as public parks and high pedestrian areas. The graphic on the right presents the open space typology map with no significant change brought forward by the CRC. Next slide, please. And these series of maps present the Scottsdale McDowell Sonoran Preserve map on the left and a visually significant roadways graphic on the right. Notably, at City Council's last work study session, which took place on February 9th, there was some discussion surrounding the creation of the McDowell Sonoran Preserve as a standalone land use designation to further reinforce and protect the initiatives created by Proposition 420. And so if I hadn't said it before, I'll say it now. Ultimately, council can modify, as council's being the ultimate approving authority on the overall plan, they can modify any elements of the plan up until their planned adoption hearing night, which will take place, as I stated, in June of 2021. But as I said, this is still an item of discussion amongst council, and so just wanted to bring that to your attention. Next slide, please. The environmental planning element provides goals and policies for protecting and enhancing the quality of Scottsdale's natural and human habitats for future generations. The element requires, per state statute, analysis on policies and strategies to address anticipated effects on air quality, water quality, and natural resources, as well as include policies and strategies designed to have a community-wide applicability. For comparative purposes, the conservation element is designed for the conservation, development, and utilization of natural resources, including forests, soils, rivers, and other natural elements. The conservation element may also cover the reclamation of land and flood, which we'll cover in a coming slide. Next slide, please. And so the environmental planning element presents the introduction on the slide before you. Notably, climate change is mentioned on this introduction, as this was a significant item of discussion. I know of past Environmental Advisory Commission meetings, as well as the Citizen Review Committee process. Next slide, please. There's also a series of goals and policies found on this page that were expand on Scottsdale demonstrating its environmental stewardship that were reinforced by EP 2.4 and EP 2.2. Next slide, please. And this spread presents some Citizen Review Committee modifications that were brought forward and again available within your agenda packet. But notably, there was previous Environmental Advisory Commission input which asked for the additional language indicated in red on the right side of the screen related to EP 4.6, which asks that we identify, promote, and support opportunities to use solid waste and recycled materials as marketable commodities. Next slide, please. Additionally, there was SEAC input to EP 4.11 and EP 4.12 on the top left portion of your screen, which asks for that the city promote and support green purchasing practices, and that Scottsdale promote commercial and multifamily recycling and green waste diversion. Again, this was direct input provided by this commission. Additionally, on the bottom right portion of the screen and indicated in red, there was direct input provided by this commission relating to EP 7.7 and EP 7.8, which asks that the city engage with and learn from and collaborate with regional, statewide, and national governmental and other entities for best practices on heat mitigation strategies, as well as the city in using, supporting, and promoting transportation measures that reduce carbon emissions. Next slide, please. There was a policy proposed by this commission that was asked for that was not incorporated by the CRC, and to be transparent in their process and considerate of the time that this commission brought forward into the draft plan, that policy is presented on the top portion of the screen as a new policy. Notably, those supporting goals and policies listed underneath the line on the screen all address renewable energy and energy efficiency within the energy element. And so part of this, the Citizen Review Committee's process was to reduce redundancy, as well as ensure that goals and their supporting policies are appropriately placed. Next slide, please. The CRC draft plan also includes the conservation element, which I previously stated guides Scottsdale's resource conservation efforts to provide a healthy and diverse environment for current and future generations. It asks, or I should say it's required per state statute to identify conservation, development, and utilization of natural resources. And it should be noted that while the conservation element was included in the 01 general plan, it was embedded within the preservation and environmental planning element. The draft 35 plan separates the conservation and environmental planning as separate elements so as to meet state statute requirements directly and more appropriately address both topics. Next slide, please. So this slide presents the introduction of the conservation element with some minor changes brought forward by the CRC.
Mr.
Next
Yaron,
slide.
I'm sorry. I do have a hand raised by one of the other commissioners. Do you mind if we take some questions while you go?
That would be fine. Chair Lazar, thank you.
Thank you, Chair or Commissioner Schlosser. You have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Chair Lazar. I actually wanted to go back 2 slides from where we're currently at to fully understand whether or not to understand whether or not the proposal was this one. Was this a policy that was rejected by the CRC, or is it included in the 3035 plan?
Commissioner Schlosser and Chair Lazar and members of the commission, this policy, which reads support, promote, and encourage a substantial increase in the use of renewable energy and energy efficiency measures in public and private buildings, was decided not to be included within the CRC draft plan, as the CRC took the position in discussion on this item, and that all of the reference goals and policies that are beneath the one I just read on the screen are all address renewable energy and energy efficiency within the energy element, and that it was not appropriate within the environmental planning element.
Can you tell me where the net zero energy, the carbon neutrality comment is in other parts of the proposal?
As I said, then, so as presented on the screen, the net zero, and we'll cover this later on in the slide deck, but the net zero is covered within goal E1 within the energy element.
Oh, okay. So the all right, fine. Thank you.
Thanks for that.
Thank you very much. So moving on, as I stated, this is the conservation element introduction. Again, some minor modifications brought forward by the CRC. Next slide, please. Some additional goals and policies specific to the conservation element and how they were addressed by either the CRC or including the public input provided by in the colored text in red. Next slide, please. This spread presents the conservation, additional conservation goals and policies. As you'll note on screen, there was not additional, or I should say significant modifications brought forward by the CRC with respect to these goals and supporting policies. Next slide, please. And finally, the last goal and policies associated with the conservation element. There was a public input that requested change to conservation 5.3, which asked to strive and restore erosion damaged areas at their previous conditions to reduce water consumption and restore a wildlife habitat that was brought forward. Next slide, please. With respect to the water resources element, this element ensures that Scottsdale continues to provide safe, reliable, and quality drinking water to the community. As per state statutes, this element shall include the known legally and physically available surface water, groundwater, and effluent supplies, the demand for water that will result from future growth projected in the general plan added to existing uses, as well as an analysis of how the demand for water that will result from future growth projected in the general plan will be served by the water supplies identified within the plan. It should be noted that while water resources element was included in the 01 general plan, it was embedded within the public services and facilities element. The draft 2035 plan separates water resources out as a separate element so as to meet state statute requirements directly and more appropriately address this topic. Accordingly, the draft 2035 water resources meets the requirements of the Arizona statutes as discussed above, whereas elements such as environmental planning and conservation discuss conservation and protection of water and water courses. Next slide, please. This slide presents the introduction of the water resources element with no significant changes brought forward by the CRC. Next slide, please. There was a new policy created under Water Resources 1.12 on the bottom left portion of your screen, which states that Scottsdale enhanced procedures through best management practices to guard against security breaches to water supply. Next slide, please. And this slide presents the water resources map, which shows shown locations of water facilities. Next slide, please. And this is the draft plan for the energy element. This element seeks to balance the energy needs of consumers with the sustainability of the community's renewable and non-renewable energy sources. As required per state statute, this element shall include a component that identifies policies that encourage and provide incentives for efficient use of energy, and an assessment that identifies policies and practices that provide for greater uses of renewable energy sources. Next slide, please. With respect to this slide deck, this format presents some additional text that was brought forward by the CRC with respect to paragraph 3, which notes that the city will be protecting existing energy resources from security breaches and other supply and distribution vulnerabilities that will remain important to ensure no permanent or long-term damage to power system operations occurs. Next slide, please. With respect to that text addition, there was a policy that was requested by this commission, asking for a new policy to read: promote energy efficiency improvements for existing residential properties and educate property owners on opportunities for such improvements. As I stated previously, the CRC was charged with removing redundancy and avoid wordsmithing where wordsmithing isn't critical, and do so where it is critical. However, as written, the series of goals and policies that are beneath the one provided at the top of your screen discuss energy efficiency within green building practices. Energy efficiency in building practices and other portions of the element. And so that new policy was not incorporated. Next slide, please. This series of slides presents goals associated with the energy element. No significant changes brought forward by the CRC. Chair Lazar, I just want to note I see a hand raised by Commissioner Schlosser.
Yes. If Mr. Schlosser or Commissioner Schlosser could ask his question. Thank you.
Thank you. I was concerned about the elimination of the E1.6, largely because most of the focus we have in the document has been on future building, green energy, green building codes. And a large part of the infrastructure that we have is as built already. And I thought that putting that element in would ensure that some of the efforts that went in implementing the plan also involved addressing people and how to make their current homes more energy efficient, either through the replacement or inclusion of double pane windows, the use of higher efficiency heating and air conditioning systems, and similar kinds of approaches to minimizing the individual energy footprint of homeowners, existing homeowners. And I just want to express that while other elements may make it appear redundant, in all of the other elements, it's an implication. It's not a stated point about existing infrastructure. And I think that is a mistake. I believe. All right. So
thank you, Steve. I think we're going to have like an opportunity to go ahead and compile a lot of our comments. So this is not going to be the end all at this point. So thank you for that. And I want to make certain that we capture, I've written that down, and I think we'll make certain that we capture all of the points that we're definitely compiling as we go. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Lazar.
Thank you, Commissioner and Chair Lazar. I'll ask for the slide to be advanced to the next slide, please. With respect to this slide, it presents additional goals and policies provided under the energy element, and specifically under E 4.6, a new policy created by the CRC, which asks that the city aim for net zero energy in city operations through the use of public-private partnerships and other means available, which certainly this commission can discuss following Commissioner Schlosser's comment just prior. Next slide, please. So we just covered all of this boards and commissions purview within the draft 2035 plan, notably within the implementation chapter. There's a new implementation chapter within the 35 plan, as implementation is ultimately the goal of the general plan. This chapter recommends measures to put the plan into effect. It manages community-wide expectations with public officials, agencies, and organizations. It promotes the public interest and understanding of the plan and develops specific plans to implement the general plan. It also assists in the creation and maintenance of our capital improvement programs. And so there was a series of input that we coordinated with your commission liaisons and staff associated with the Office of Environmental Initiatives that brought forward some updates to timing and specific program naming conventions, if you will, within this implementation chapter. And as you'll note, specific to some of these items, it was advancing some of your sustainability plans, which I believe is covered in a later item on your agenda, but advances it from a 5 to 10 year period to the 1 to 5 year timeframe. Additionally, as I mentioned previously, we've had one set of work study session meeting with City Council, in which there was some discussion about adding a tree canopy or tree canopy plan to a specific policy. And as mentioned in what the general plan is intended to provide for, it's intended to provide a very broad look at citywide initiatives, and that may be specific, but still yet a discussion point for council as to whether or not they'll include an item such as that within an implementation chapter of the plan, or try and reference it more specifically within a policy. But that discussion is ongoing. Next slide, please. I'll just mention other SEAC comments that were previously submitted. Next slide, please. There was a policy related to, or a new policy proposed within the safety element that was proposed on the top portion of the screen. And we, as staff, had worked with Troy Latruc, who's the emergency manager for Scottsdale, to vet the proposed text. And he provided a series of examples of how there's existing citywide infrastructure that provides opportunities for there to be outages and not create issues for communication with the public with respect to a series of programs and systems that are already in effect, either through registration-based system or not. And so next slide, please. Specific to this proposed policy, and as I stated previously, in consultation with emergency services manager, S1.3 and S2.2 would support the intent of the proposed text by this commission, but is already covered by those two supporting policies. Next slide, please. And here's where that those two policies would be found within the plan. I'll leave that on screen for a moment. Next slide, please. Additionally, as a result of input provided by this commission specific to previous agenda items of this commission, I know this commission has been meeting regularly on the general plan and its content. When staff was in receipt of specific text, that text was presented before the commission as a representation of content that was provided by SEAC. And so there were some proposed modifications to goal EV, that's economic vitality 3, which asks for the integration of words like environment and being sensitive to environmental habitats, so on and so forth within the plan. But as I stated earlier, this committee was tasked with removing redundancy, and those language proposals really change the intent of the respective goal or policy, in that you could really place environmental in front of any goal or policy associated within the plan, and request a change. And so accordingly, the goal LU5, which is land use, and policy CD 1.1, that's character and design, address environmental considerations in land use and character and design. Next slide, please. Would like to just briefly cover what our next steps are in the process. Between February and March, we'll be meeting with other city boards and commissions just like this one through public meetings and community open houses, to which we'll have a virtual open house with members of the public on Thursday, the 18th, that's tomorrow. And we have 3 of them, morning, afternoon, and evening. Those are registration-based meetings. We'll also be having a remote planning commission hearing later on in March, and a number of city council study sessions through the remainder of March and into April. And we'll culminate the process with a planning recommendation hearing in the early part of the second quarter of 2021, and hope to have a city council adoption hearing in June of 2021. As I stated earlier, if council is to adopt the draft plan, we'll move forward to the special election of November of 2021 with public vote. Throughout all stages presented on the screen, we'll be meeting with the community members and groups so as to provide education and awareness on the plan and what the plan provides for. Next slide, please. And with respect to if you'd like to provide additional individual input on other portions of the plan not covered this evening and outside of really the scope of this commission, you could go to scottsdaleaz.gov, keyword general plan updates, and we have an opportunity to review the track legislative changes in a similar way to those that were presented in your agenda packet. Or you can identify specifically those elements individually within the plan and provide individual comments. All comments collected are being presented to both Planning Commission as a recommendation body, to City Council as they have their own individual process per state statute, for Planning Commission to consider, as well as City Council to consider. Next slide, please. So the recommended approach this evening was to review, discuss, and provide input on those sections of the recommended draft plan to which this commission has purview. I might suggest if Commissioner Johnson wants to share in his experience on the Citizen Review Committee with his fellow commissioners, that would be certainly available. And if there's any big items perhaps missed by your review of the draft plan, and that is speaking to all commissioners here on the call, we'd be happy to note them for Planning Commission and City Council to consider. Next slide, please. If you need more information on the update process, staff's information is available on the screen. That concludes staff's presentation. Chair Lazar, Vice Chair Coletta, I very much appreciate your time this evening, and I'm available to answer any questions if needed.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yaron. This is Chair Lazar, or Chrisman Lazar, whatever I want to go by now. And I appreciate your time and your very comprehensive, presentation. I especially enjoyed the premise of you identifying some of the things that council is looking at as they go through this. We definitely are very interested in the general plan. I don't know with that we are prepared to tell you right now all of our comments, and we would like to be able to, and I think that it seems adequate to be able to provide you a more thoughtful response in that kind of in that vein. We appreciate all the hard work that you're doing, and I really think that you have been balancing quite a few different stakeholders in this process, and we really do want to help you with this process. But I mean, I do really want to, just go on record indicating that, I do not believe that sustainability is only limited to, the purview of that single chapter or the implementation. And I do want to prepare you that, it is possible that we would still continue to provide recommendations on other chapters. I just think that that's totally not appropriate to have us only have a voice on one particular area, when again, some of these items are things that broach multiple areas in the city. I do want to recognize Chairperson Bossy.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Chrisman Lazar. I would like to echo those sentiments. And one of the reasons that some of the comments were made in areas, quote, outside our purview, is that sustainability is a lens that if it needs to basically pretty much be a baseline a value in everything we do, if we're going to be able to live up to our responsibilities for our residents and for our future residents. So certainly when we say, oh, well, that is a duplicate, I think that some of those things we might potentially want to revisit, because there was a reason why they were specifically suggested in the other areas, and it was fairly limited. It could be hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments along those lines, but there were a few carefully selected suggestions for that very reason, because people who is the vast majority still of our citizenry is still learning to even understand what a sustainability lens is. And therefore, it would benefit everyone if we do have, in effect, some degree of, quote, a duplication, which because it is very important to have that lens infiltrate everything about the way we live and create policies, if we're really going to fully accomplish our responsibilities for our residents. So there are some specific items here. I think possibly, as Chair Chrisman Lazar suggested, that we might bring those specific responses back at the March meeting. But particularly those items that you mentioned that were explicitly rejected, and also possibly a little more focus possibly on resiliency or even climate action. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Yaron, you have your hand up.
Chair Chrisman Lazar, Commissioner Bossy, thank you very much for the comments. I just want to note that Council is discussing sustainability chapter on March 2nd at their work study session. And so this may provide some additional opportunity for either the Commission to tune in and understand their review of that chapter, but as well as provide some additional public input. It may or may not come in line with your next meeting date, but if this commission wanted to provide comments for council to consider at their work study session, it would be for that meeting on March 2nd.
March 2nd. Thank you for reiterating that. March 2nd. We will make certain that we include that. Thank you so much for letting us know. And we do really appreciate all the work here. You have done an awesome job trying to, balance a lot of competing issues, and we really appreciate that. And we definitely want to support this process. And we will definitely be thoughtful in any, additional commentary that we provide.
Thank you very much. Chair, I see a hand raised by Commissioner Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, thank you.
Thanks for calling on me. I just want to let the record reflect that I joined at about 5:35 in my car. I listened to most of that. Adam's done a tremendous job. All the staff have done a tremendous job on this. We've got a humongous document. I think it was very well considered. As he said, we did a 6-hour marathon in our last meeting. I'm proud of the work that we've done. Do I love every sentence in this document? No, I think there's always room for improvement. So I look forward to having the conversation next month with the commission. But thanks to the staff. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Do we have any other comments on the general plan before we move on? Commissioner Bossi?
Thank you, Chair Lazar. Just one quick point of clarification. So if the work study session is on the 2nd, what would be in his estimation, the most proper and expeditious way to have any input prior to that? Or do we just, if anything that we agree on collectively, if anything, to put forward at the next meeting, is that still a timeline that will be considered in the accepted timeline for this process?
I mean, my vision is that, we have the ability to, come up with any, we have to spend some time here looking at this, what we have in front of us, and again, be thoughtful and in terms of what we would like to recommend from the commission. However, we do also have the ability as citizens to provide whatever comment we would like to the study session, I would imagine.
Just Mr. Yaron, so it says February and March is our input timeline. So as long as we had something to you in that March timeframe, that would be productive as far as the process. Is that accurate?
Commissioner Bossi, Chair Chrisman Lazar, that's correct.
Okay.
That would be certainly fine. But as the chair mentioned, certainly you can provide individual comment as you like. And we're providing, updates to the same public comment matrices that were included in your agenda packets are being updated and constantly sent to City Council to consider. And so if there's additional input that you want to provide individually as a citizen and not as a commission per se, you can do so by, as I stated, going to scottsdaleaz.gov,
Right.
keyword general plan updates, and provide your review and input there.
Yes, thank you very much. And just echo what a great job everyone did. It was a Herculean effort, and hopefully that all the commissions will be able to fully engage in a short timeline that we have in front of us, so we can keep this all moving and get a new plan adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bossi. I do encourage all of our commission to, again, look at this in terms of where we can make the most impact, and to Commissioner Johnson's point, wordsmithing isn't our objective here. It really is, if there's something that we really want to make certain is stronger or that is included, that is not included, if we want to make this document better, those are the ideas that we need to work on between now and March, and have a fully prepared response for recommendations if we have those. So I encourage each one of you, if there are things that you need to speak about right at the moment and you want to make certain that these are considered and we're all talking about it, this is the time that we can bring those up in the agenda. Commissioner Bossi?
Just to clarify, Chair Lazar, this is the time, get it on, but we also still, with the next couple weeks,
totally.
are going to be working on it. Okay.
Yes, we're going to be working on it. I'm just saying, like, if there's something that you would like to share now, in the interim between, so that we have it before getting
Yeah.
to March.
Okay.
But I mean, we do have the opportunity again to, fully develop our thoughts and submit those to our staff, so that we have something to work from in March.
Thank you.
Okay, with that said, I appreciate your time, and I think we are able to go on to our next item in the agenda, presentation and discussion regarding the Parks and Recreation Department's organic turf project.
Thank you, Chair Chrisman Lazar. This is Sam Brown. I work in the environmental department, and I have worked with Jody Pierce, the parks manager, in consultation with him. He was unable to make it tonight, but this is a very brief summary of his project that he presented probably about a year ago to the commission. In summary, we at Chaparral Park, there were 3 test plots. One up in the upper left-hand corner, the blue was basically a baseline standard treatment, baseball outfield of turf that received the standard parkland treatment of pre-emergent, a herbicide that keeps weeds from germinating, and synthetic fertilizer. On the just below it, on the large soccer field, what we call the west plot, was treated, no pre-emergent used over those 4 acres, but synthetic fertilizer was used in the west plot. On the east plot, 2.7 acres, no pre-emergent and organic fertilizer was used. So we have the 3 scenarios for comparison there. And just a picture comparing over time, May, June through October, the results essentially of both the organic and synthetic fertilizer promoting the healthy green turf.
Mr. Brown, sorry, can you go back to the picture? So is the red line demarking the 2 plots?
I failed to clarify that with him, but that was my recollection, that was right down the middle of those 2 plots to show essentially no difference between the 2 plots as they went along.
And triple M?
Say that again, Adam?
The demarking June 17th after triple M?
Oh, after Mighty Mud Mania.
There you go. Thank you.
Yes. So that took quite a beating, but still, as you can see in October with full playing and very healthy turf. In summary, though, both the east and west plots produced healthy, safe turf, no difference in quality between the 2 turfs. Both plots were relatively weed-free, and that's the true nature of healthy turf, is it doesn't give weeds a chance to germinate. Organic fertilizer, though, bottom line, was roughly 3 times the cost. And you see the breakdown there between the product, labor, cost per acre of synthetic and organic, essentially both, just sources of nitrogen.
Mr. Brown,
yes.
Mr. Vice Chair Coletta has a question.
Tony, please go ahead.
Yeah, Sam, just a question on the picture. I know there was 3 variations that were mentioned. Does the picture cover all those or just the east and west? Or is it comparison to the baseline?
No, the variations are just between the 2, organic versus synthetic fertilizer. So each of those test plots, east and west, had no pre-emergent. So essentially it was, is there a significant difference in organic versus non-organic fertilizer on those 2?
Okay, thank you, Sam.
But however, and that turf project wrapped up with the conclusion of the season and these costs. But going forward, the Scottsdale Green Team has submitted a proposal drafting a formal justification for the Parks Department for establishing a job function whose roles include serving as the pesticide responsible party. And that is significant. That would be a dedicated person for finalizing and implementing the integrated pest management plan. And that plan calls out for real-time inventory and researching and testing less toxic alternatives. So that's a significant push forward. The Green Team's role is to promote the sustainability aspects of that in conjunction with Scottsdale's sustainability movement. And that's all I have. Thank you. Any questions on that?
Sam, thank you so much. I just have a quick question before anybody else has one. The pre-emergent, was it basically determined that it wasn't required? I mean, I think we were able to achieve wonderful turf without it. I mean, that's something that I took away when you were showing this. And so I'm trying to understand the premise of the pesticide here.
Very good question. And Jody will have to speak on that. The pre-emergent is used depending on the turf characteristics. If a known area has a lot of disturbance due to its use, and it's the soil disturbance that promotes weed growth, they may apply pre-emergent twice a year, typically once a year. But in this case, on these test plots, it was, to draw conclusions using no pre-emergent for 1 year. And I don't know at this point how that is going to play into the full parkland turf management process going forward. But I think it was very encouraging.
I definitely want to say great to, that we're going to try to manage our pesticides more responsibly. But I mean, for myself, I thought that the results were encouraging from the standpoint of being able to show that we don't need them all the time. And I would recommend, at least that would be my view in looking at the study, that we go take this a little bit further and really identify, how we can reduce use of it. I mean, I get that there might be times when you have to go that route, but I mean, when you're dealing with a cost study, you have to look at the pros and cons associated with costs. If you have to buy more expensive organic material, maybe the offset is that you get healthier plots over time, that you never have to have the pre-emergent. So again, I think the study is encouraging, and I would definitely recommend, and my view of this is I think that the green team's recommendations are definitely awesome. I just would try to say we need to take it possibly a step further. Commissioner Bossi, if you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair Chrisman Lazar. I guess I would reiterate what you've just said largely, and also say that's excellent and very exciting that we're looking at making that recommendation from the Green Team. Yay, Green Team. And I'd have to go back and remember all the details, because there's a lot of science behind all of that integrated pest management. But one of the key things is when we're budgeting, and I think it's one of the bigger sustainability challenges everywhere, is how do we measure the cost of synthetic and other pesticides. And that's the thing that we generally don't do. We just look at how much is it, this bag of this material cost, but we don't look at how much savings do we get in other ways for the health of our citizens, and for other costs that might be incurred for having to deal with the repercussions of pesticides. So that's I'm not sure if there's any conversation about that, but I just throw that thought out there. And best I remember, when we were having those proposals, there were some other soil management practices besides just the use of a particular fertilizer that would also make a difference in the health of that turf. So hopefully that integrated pest management person that we might manifest through this recommendation, again, thank you, will bear fruit in that arena. So I say it's certainly a successful step in the right direction, and thank everyone for their work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Coletta, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair Chrisman Lazar. Sam, from the aerial, it was kind of hard to tell how much or the amount of play or activities would be held on those areas. Do you happen to know, I guess is the question, and if you do, what the durability was? I mean, I looked green in the one photo, but I'd also like to know how durable it was from either soccer, baseball, or whatever. Do you happen to know that? Thank you.
Commissioner Coletta, if I understood your question, what was the activity or the level of activity played? Was that your question?
Yeah, more so, not so much the type, but how much. I mean, did they withstand the test of time from a number of soccer games from one side versus the other?
Yes, and according to the parks manager, there was virtually no difference in the quality, height, density, safety aspects of the turf between the two plots. They were both used equally as playing fields, and then of course Mighty Mud Mania for parking and those activities. Yeah.
So is the plan, Mr. Brown, to go ahead and continue to maintain them the same way, or what is the plan for the Parks Department going forward?
At this point, there is no plan to go forward with this. I think they understood, they got their baseline on the organic versus synthetic fertilizer. One of the things which would require further study and a focus of the responsible party would be tracking and limiting to a minimum the amount of pre-emergent used. But I think they had a very clear understanding between the labor and the material costs on the fertilizer, which is simply a source of nitrogen, that at this point it's not justified to go organic versus synthetic, considering the large acreage under turf in the parks.
But I do think that it's, again, missing the point in terms of what an organic fertilizer can do over time. And I get that it is a source of nitrogen and potassium. However, an organic fertilizer can also help condition soil over time such that, you know, the requirements for, again, pre-emergence may or may not be as necessary. And so I definitely would encourage, you know, a thought process that's not just based on the premise of, you know, that one is less expensive than the other. We already knew that. It really is, are there benefits associated with one versus the other in terms of toxicity over time? Because I would imagine that utilizing the pre-emergent is also very expensive.
Noted.
Commissioner Bossy?
Thank you, Chair Christman Lazar. Mr. Brown, just one question. What would the process be in the budgeting process to make a decision to include organic in the budget in spite of what seemingly is the higher cost, except for as Chair Christman Lazar suggested, do we extract the fact that we're not using the pre-emergent and other benefits? But what would have to happen what's the accepted process to make a decision on something based on public health benefits, that even though it's more costly in the budget, you know, it would cause, you know, a higher line item budget?
Well, I have to say this up front. I cannot speak to the details of budgetary planning, but any budget measure requires justification, sound justification, and strong support based on science and facts and you know, the economy of scale when considering the parks. And I am not a parks management person. I really do try to help on the toxicity issues. I have a background in that and an understanding in that, and try to advise on that. So that's all I can comment on that question, Commissioner Bossy.
Thanks so much, Sam. I think that Mr. Connor has his hand raised.
Thank you, Chair Christman Lazar and members of the commission. During the budget process, for our operational budget, we submit what they call budget packets. And these budget packets are used to justify any increases in budget or decreases in budget. It's an alternative for looking at, you know, how the budget is going to be formed. And that would have to be put together by the department who is representing that package, which would be at this time the Parks and Recreation Department or Community Services. So I'm not sure exactly where we're at in the budget process to date, but I think that we're behind the curve if we're trying to get it in the next fiscal year's budget. Maybe Assistant City Manager Stockwell could speak to that as well.
Mr. Stockwell, would you like to comment?
Chair, members of the commission, I don't know what more I could add to that.
Okay, no
Um,
worries, no
yeah.
worries.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mhm.
I think the point here is, I appreciate the study. I do think that there might be some other additional continued work on it from the standpoint of kind of answering some of those other questions. So I think that I appreciate, the city's intent in trying to evaluate this. And I do just think that, there might be some additional work that could be done. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Mr. Coletta, you have your hand raised.
Thank you, Chair Chris Lazar. Would it be possible as a future agenda item to have Jody come and maybe speak to us on the issue and answer some of these questions that we can't get answers to?
I think that that's a great recommendation. We will definitely add it to the agenda.
Thank
Does
you.
anybody else have any additional questions about this particular item? If we don't, let's move on to the next exciting thing, the presentation, discussion, and possible recommendations for our Initiative 3, Develop Heat Island Mitigation Plan, Tree Shade and Urban Cooling Plan, and Green Infrastructure / Low Impact Development Plan. And we have our own Mr. Connor to talk to us about that.
Thank you, Chair and members of the commission. Tonight, we're going to discuss the organizational strategic plan again. You've heard 2 different presentations to date. There will be 5 total because there are 5 different initiatives. Next slide, please. I just wanted to kind of go over a real quick background again, just to remind you that there's a state environmental sustainability steering team, which is staffed by the city manager's office, the mayor's office, and the council office. Representatives of community services, representatives of planning and economic development and tourism. Public Works is active in this commission, or excuse me, steering team, and of course, Scottsdale Water. Next slide, please. Again, just going through this, the overall objective is to preserve and enhance the environment through energy, green buildings, solar, solid waste, and water initiatives. Tonight, we're discussing Initiative 3, which is develop the Heat Island Mitigation Plan, Tree Shade and Urban Cooling Plan, and Green Infrastructure and Low Impact Development Plan. Next slide, please. Recently, you had also heard from ASU, the Walton Sustainability Group. Next slide, please. I'm going to go through this very briefly just to kind of refresh your memory about what they're working on, because it relates to this initiative very much. So their project overview, what they had with 5 phases that they were attempting to accomplish: microclimate assessment, microclimate modeling, mitigation and adaptation strategies, education and policy development, and then reports and presentations. Currently, they're in the throes of probably the middle of element 2 in the microclimate modeling. Next slide, please. Some of the outcomes that they responded to the commission's input were to do an overall Scottsdale city map showing the different heat assessments that we had. This, I believe, was from a satellite imagery done by Landsat 8. So next slide, please. And a similar one was done by extreme surface temperature readings that they were able to compile. And it really reflects the same as what we had gotten from the satellite imagery. Next slide, please. Now I want to move on to the green infrastructure and low impact development portion. This is an alternative stormwater management. Start out with some definitions. What is green infrastructure? And I'll use GI and green infrastructure interchangeably throughout this presentation. Green infrastructure refers to a class of stormwater control measures that slow, capture, treat, infiltrate, and or store runoff at its source. Sam, next slide, please. Low impact development, or LID, is an engineered stormwater management approach utilizing green infrastructure techniques which mimic nature and manage the rainfall near its source using decentralized control methods to gain the benefits of GI. When you say decentralized, that means that you're talking about not trying to gather it all in one space, but you're going to be using a variety of spaces to do the capturing. Some of the principles and approaches is, if you're doing development, you want to minimize the land disturbances in the development, hopefully encouraging and incorporating the natural features into the development, and doing so in a way of mimicking pre-development hydrology. Next slide, please. Some of the approaches also include reducing and disconnecting impervious surfaces, decentralizing stormwater management, once again, and treating stormwater near its source. Next slide, please. One of the benefits that's coming out of the LID and GI studies that we were looking at, first of all, the Valley has a requirement for first flush treatment. The first flush is basically the first half inch of the stormwater that comes through an event. And the idea of LID and GI is that it will capture that first half inch and cleanse it first before it allows additional water to flow downstream if necessary. One of the interesting factoids that we found during this process was 82% of all storm events in the Valley are 1/2 inch or less. So LID and GI can make a substantial difference in at least those events that we have. There's also the technical aspect of our Valley cities with MS4, which is multi-sewer separated sewer systems, and general stormwater permit requirements that often speak to the LID and GI requirements. Those things are being updated additionally by ADEQ as we move along in time. Next slide, please. Additional benefits, again, is detaining the stormwater close to its runoff, to its source. This reduces the runoff and velocity downstream. It collects sediment and reduces pollutants of the stormwater runoff. It utilizes stormwater harvesting to support landscape and reduce potable water irrigation needs. Next slide, please. Additionally, it reduces the impact on the gray infrastructure. It provides habitat for wildlife, supports tree canopy growth, which could obviously provide more shade and help us with our heat island reduction. Provides multiple use opportunities such as open space and landscaping, which adds to the community's quality of life. Next slide, Sam. Some of the barriers and challenges that we are facing, and we have faced for some time now, is just the attitude of just why would we need to change now? This is business as usual. We're going to take care of the 100-year drainage event and get that water off the site as fast as we can. The other things that are noted often is that LID and GI do not resolve the 100-year event by itself, and that's true. Again, the half inch of the first flush is what we're trying to accomplish with the LID. Uncertainty in private development is unconvinced that permitting agencies are going to accept the concepts of low impact development in green infrastructure. Next slide. Permitting agencies have not consistently embraced LID and GI, and that's correct. There's also the myth that basically it has not been tested locally. I'll show you some slides later in the presentation that are showing how the flood control district is testing this method of stormwater management. This one stands out though, and this will be probably the rest of the presentation. There's no consistent valley-wide detail, no Maricopa Association standard details or specifications addressing low impact development. Next slide, please. So how do we implement? We need to find an organizational structure to work towards consensus and consistency. We need to deal with the regional issues of stormwater quality. We are experiencing a regional drought that requires action now. There's a need for technical details supported by multiple Valley communities. And of course, money always helps the process. Next slide, please. What a group of us did, and excuse me, that's kind of not the right thing to say, but there was a project core team formed where the City of Scottsdale took the lead in managing the project and hiring the consultants. ASU Sustainable Cities Network also was a key player in this core team. City of Phoenix was represented, and the Maricopa County Flood Control District was represented as well. There were review teams. There were 9 different review teams for different jurisdictions and agencies. And the tasks of the scope of work were divided into 4 tasks. Selecting the details, developing the engineering details, developing the schematic landscape details, and developing an overall outreach and educational advocacy campaign. Excuse me, I'm sorry. A little dry in the mouth tonight. The consultant team that we did hire was Dibble Engineering and Logan Logan Simpson Design. Actually, they go by Logan Simpson today, but they're a landscape architecture and planning group. Next slide, please. The outcome of this process ended up creating the Greater Phoenix Metro Handbook for Green Infrastructure and Low Impact Development. Next slide, please. Within that, we developed those 10 details that we had discussed for task 1. And we've created those details such that they are also provided in AutoCAD format so that the developers and the engineers and designers can utilize them directly off of those AutoCAD details. Next slide, please. This is kind of the way the manual lays out. This is a harvesting basin detail, and essentially you start with the engineering detail. It's referenced in the landscape details as to schematics of how to possibly plant the basins. There's also then engineering reports that explain the ups and downs as well as where the appropriate places are to use the detail. Then there are specifications that are done in the MAG format. Where there weren't MAG specifications, we ended up creating specifications that would fit into the MAG format. And the final picture on the right is just an example of a harvesting basin that's located on the flood control district's property. Next slide, please. The landscaping schematics were done for each of the details. And then there's also plant lists developed, and there are additional plant lists referenced at the appendix of this document. But the plant lists were provided by Logan Simpson. We're talking to plants that work in the inundation areas, which is where the water tends to pond and sit for some time. And there's also plant lists for the sides of the basins and other elements. Next slide, Sam. This is the slide I was referring to earlier. The Flood Control District of Maricopa County created test pits with different media inside of each of the pits. And obviously we had a good event when this photograph was taken. You can see that there's a difference of what the retention values were and where things were actually absorbed quite quickly. The Flood Control District continues to experiment with LID. Right now they're in the throes of creating the campus as a experimental and showcase for all different LID details that we've been working on. They also are creating details for rural environment for LID. Next slide, please. Okay, the intent that we were trying to get to as a group was to begin to standardize these details and to get them incorporated into the design and development standards of the different cities and communities, and ultimately into the uniform standards and specifications details for public works construction, a MAG publication, which is where the standard details are residing. We've had some luck with that so far. There's an ad hoc committee that's working on this to try to bring these details in. It's represented by some of the members of that committee. We've been successful in getting at least one of the details, which was pervious concrete. We were able to get that into the MAG standards that was voted on by the larger committee, not just the ad hoc committee bringing it forward. And they did accept it after some minor modifications. We're hoping to take this a little further next year. The ad hoc committee is proposing at least 3 details. We've presented the concept to the larger committee and are working still on a every other week basis to try to bring those details out and get those finished. There's comments being made by all the different communities that are involved. We've got probably, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood again of about 9 communities working on these details. So it's very much an organized event for us trying to take this forward to have some kind of consensus as we move out. Next slide, please. So why do we do this? Quality, consistent implementation valley-wide. That's the whole hope of this. And also then once it becomes implemented in several different areas, I think that some of the different myths and concerns are going to start to fade away. Next slide, please. Wanted to give you an overview of one of the LID features that's in Scottsdale. I'm sure most of you have visited the Museum of the West. There's a bioswale that was created there at the museum. The bioswale is a pretty intense element. If you look at the diagram and kind of follow along with me from the top to the bottom, I'll help you out with that, and then we'll go from the left to the right. From the top of the building, the condensation lines go down a wall that's called a weeping wall that's inside a courtyard. That wall then channels the water into a pipe that goes under the building. Additionally, the roofs are gathered and the rain leader lines come down and go into the basin. There's a photograph on the right-hand side that shows a channel that was used to create that rain leader line, and it shows it pouring into the basin. The swale itself, of course, runs along the spine of the building, but it is also gathering water from the street as well as the plaza that surrounds it. And additionally, we have water coming off of Marshall Way and going into other basins that are located on site. Sam, next slide, please. These are some photographs that were taken during the construction, the end of the construction of that bioswale. As you can see, one is showing an inundation of an event, and the water is still pouring into the basin. Eventually, it will fill up and pour back out into Marshall Way and head back down the gray infrastructure. That allows the percolation to work to the point where we don't have any problem with the 36-hour vector control rule that's countywide. Next slide, please. Just another shot of the basin, looking the opposite direction. Next slide, please. This rain leader line that I spoke to, this is actually, like I said, an open channel. It allows that water coming off the roof to flow, cross the sidewalk with a grate and go into the basin and start to be filling up the basin during an event. Next slide, please, Sam. And this is a shot of Marshall Way, just showing you the detail of the curb cuts that are pulling the water in off of the street and some of the basins that are benefiting from that. Next slide, please. Another curb cut with grate that's on another street. It's on 2nd Street, showing another basin that just shows a difference of different swales and basins that can be placed on site. And the next slide. So that's my presentation tonight. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And Chair Lazar, if you would like to ask the commission if they have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Also, I just wanted to mention that there's a link on this slide that's showing how to get to the handbook at ASU's site. The City of Scottsdale also has it on our website. If you go out and search for LID or low impact development, I think you'll find it. If you have problems with that, please give me a call and I'll help you out.
Thank you, Mr. Connor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have one quick question for you.
Sure.
So I know that the main thrust of the work here is to try to get consensus across the valley so that you can, have a MAG spec and standard that people can utilize. However, is the City of Scottsdale requiring or promoting use of any of these methodologies?
We are promoting it, Chair Lazar. I'm not sure how successful we've been. I do recognize some projects that have it placed in it privately. The City of Scottsdale has also made a commitment to, in their capital programs, where it's appropriate, to install LID features. I had contacted the city engineer, Dave Lipinski, and asked him a question about 2 months ago, how are we doing? And he came back with a list of 5 projects that we're including this one as well. Some of the other ones were the pervious pavement that we used in the park and ride that's over at Thunderbird and Scottsdale Road. Avaloosa Library and the Cavalier Park, they have decomposed granite parking areas. Chaparral Road and to 69th Street to Scottsdale Road is a true LID setup. Additionally, the Crosscut Canal on the Bellevue on Bellevue is also an example of the true LID installation. I'm not sure if you're aware that at the end of Bellevue, towards the canal, the Crosscut Canal, there's a entry for the public to come and start to take their walk. And so the details for the landscaping were done utilizing LID.
Awesome. What help can the commission give to further this process?
I think anything the commission can do to help us to publicize and educate our private development on what we're trying to do, and also encourage our other staff, our planning and development staff, and our engineering staff to consider promoting this much more. And I know that my executive director, Randy Grant, very much would love to see that happen. He is definitely a proponent of this and is behind it 100%.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else on the commission have any comments? I have Tammy Bossy, Commissioner Bossy has her hand up.
Just a quick question. Thank you for Mr. Connor. So the city of so Paradise Valley has a development requirement that requires the drainage, I guess in a sense, a bioswale on site when they built, the houses. Do we have anything like that, or is that emerging, or is that something being discussed, or they're basically requiring an ability to have much of the runoff go right into some lower spot designed and engineered on site in Paradise Valley.
Chair Crispin Lazar and Commissioner Bossy, what that is intended to be is on-site retention. We do have a ordinance that enforces that. You won't see it in some of the more urban areas, such as the downtown and probably portions of the air park at this time that were built out earlier, as well as possibly some of the older properties that are along the McDowell and South Scottsdale Road corridor. Some of that has to do with sites. They're so small and so shallow, they're not able to do that. Now, one of the things that happens though with those detention basins, because they're not full retention basins in our commercial zones, but they're actually detention. They hold the water for a period of time, and then it's metered out through normally some type of a pipe to get it to the gray water, the gray infrastructure. There is something that's going on in Tucson that's rather interesting. That again, it's dealing with commercial development, where Paradise Valley is primary, in fact, only residential development, which is different, but it's much larger lots. I think the minimum lot size generally in Paradise Valley is 1 acre. So they have more room to do some of this. But in Tucson, there is actually an ordinance requiring commercial development of a certain size. I believe it's 10,000 square feet or larger. They must retain on-site and harvest 20% of their necessary stormwater for irrigation purposes. So they need to do it and use it to get to the plants and basically go ahead and utilize that to offset their potable water use. Tucson is definitely ahead of us in this game. When I first went down to see what they were doing, I want to think it was back in about 2010, possibly, but they were already ahead of us. And they had been following Albuquerque, who was the leader in the desert area for low impact development. The EPA had basically backed away from the southwestern desert because they didn't know how to implement low impact development. The EPA had required it in several different areas. And so they, places like Washington, state of Washington, Seattle, East Coast, they're getting plenty of rainwater, and they can know how to handle it. And they can also saturate it up with green infrastructure such as grass and turf. We tend to shy away from the grass and turf wherever possible. And so we have to use different methods to get those details to work. And that's why we were creating these details. Pima County also has a set of details, as well as Tucson. Tucson is pretty much partnered with Pima County. They actually have a low impact working group in what they call PAG, which is the Pima Association of Government, which basically put out several different, I'm trying to think of the name of the word to use, proclamations that the PAG group with all the mayors that were in the Pima County Association got together and wrote proclamations that first enforced, or at least encouraged, the idea of water harvesting. Next, the encouragement of using green infrastructure. And lastly, the use of LID in association with economic development, which is kind of an interesting twist. That's what I have to offer, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. I really appreciate it. And I do think that this, just gives us a taste of the possibilities and available to us as we look at some of these documents, our plans, or looking at the sustainability plan, looking at natural resources and how we're best protecting that in Scottsdale, and looking at ways we can be leaders. And so I definitely appreciate the presentation and your service doing this important work. I think that, again, looking at ways that the commission can support this is definitely something that we should think about as we go forward.
Thank you, Chair Charisma Lazar. I'm having trouble.
It's a tongue twister. It's hard.
Well, yeah. But in any case, excuse me, if anyone would like a hard copy of the book, I do have that. I would be happy to make that available. We printed several, even though it's not environmentally conscious, but we printed several just to get people to look at it. So be happy to spread those out within your groups. And if you'd like to have me come out and speak to one of your groups, that would be I'd be happy to do that as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have 2 more topics, so let's go ahead and get through them because it's already 7:05. This first plan, our first topic is really the work plan. At the end of last meeting, I kind of just indicated that I've been struggling personally without having a framework for a lot of what we do. And to that end, I went through and just spent a little time developing, the bones of a work plan. And I hope you all had a chance to kind of take a look at that before you came. The easy part, of course, is, our contact information. I don't know if if you're like me, I sit around and try to remember, this type of information on a regular basis. Also the meetings, that's just useful information. Other useful information that I just want to point out before I get into the meat is at the end of this. There are some places where I get, specifically a little turned around on, the framework that we work in relative to what the city does. And so for that reason, I went through and put the organization strategic plan that seeks sustainability goal that Tim talked about at the end here, so that we can really kind of keep that in perspective so that we can best fit with what the city is already doing. So if you wanted to go ahead and scroll a little bit farther down, just down the next page, there you go. So this actually, for reference purposes, can at least give us, some place relative to what the city is meeting on a regular basis, so that we can integrate the work that we do better into what the city does. So that was the purpose of kind of showing this additional strategic plan. I also went through and added if you scroll down a little bit farther, we have a lot of individuals that come and speak to us a little bit, the next page, that, I kind of get lost sometimes on all the different individuals, all the different players. So, these are some of the people that are actually on the sustainability steering team and who are regularly meeting and, trying to, definitely do the best they can for the city. So I just want to have this as reference for us as we continue to go. And so that was the whole purpose of putting that type of information together. Again, I think integrating into an existing framework helps us be more productive. So the part that I really wanted to focus on was the priorities. And if you want to scroll up to section 3, the first part there, I went through and I basically summarized what we already have on the books. We went through the process of looking at what our annual report last year, and identifying basically the things that were important to us, and some of the things that we do to support those goals. And so I tried to identify those in those 2 boxes, basically goals versus activities that we do. And again, none of this should seem new and improved or anything. Pretty much the only reason I added something to this list was because I know it's something that maybe it wasn't on the annual report, but it's something that I know we have included in the past, and or there has been recent correspondence on that. A good example here was really, the premise of limiting the discharge of brine solutions from water softeners. So, that's not something that we've taken up right at the moment. However, it is something that I have seen recent correspondence on, so I included that on this list. So the first question I have for you all is, are there things on this list that we either want to remove or add? And everybody is quiet. Any input? Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, let me just say I applaud this idea, this effort, and I don't have things to add or subtract. I just want to be supportive of this concept because I think it is a really good one. And go ahead.
I can't take entire, what do you call it? I did have some guidance from other commissions in terms of some of the things that they were doing. Mr. Stockwell did provide me, I think both the Veterans Administration or Veterans Commission as well as the Health and Human Services Commission, both have plans, and definitely tried to utilize the general premise of them and make it something that is workable for us. Did I interrupt you? Did you have anything else to say?
No, it's okay.
Sorry.
It's always good. I was just going to say, it's always good to have a map so you know where you're going. And if you don't have a map, any road will get you anywhere. So
Totally.
I appreciate the idea.
Thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Bossy.
Thank you, Chair Crispin Lazar. And just, I guess, a couple things just to start conversation. I wanted to clarify the 3B. Advocate for solar electric infrastructure. Is that increased solar electric infrastructure?
I think it's just advocate. It's really support that concept of solar electric infrastructure at city facilities. It is something, again, that is, I'm pretty certain came straight out of our annual reports.
It is in there. Yeah, just thinking as I see it, is it solar and electric, and it's an increased. And we did have that word advocate, which, oh boy, we had lots of conversations about that word in past days. Yes, the brine word is left from some older initiatives because of something that we just haven't gotten back to. I see we might want to re-add this turf management somewhere in the appropriate place.
I think I included it in F, promote and provide input regarding sustainable turf management in city
right
parks.
here. I'm sorry, I missed it. You sure did. On one F. Okay. And then the tree and shade.
I am being crazy here, and I'm kind of referring to that as urban forestry. It may or may not be the best way to refer to it, but that is how I have put that in there right at the moment. If we want to go back to tree and shade, that is, definitely, I don't have any problems with that. I do know that I've spoken with various other individuals, and I mean, it sounds a little bit more progressive, urban forestry, but I'm totally okay with changing that to tree and shade if we think that that's something we want to do.
I guess, okay. I guess I don't have, I like the words urban forestry. The tree and shade's more commonly used, certainly, but either works. Okay. I don't know who others have a thought about that. Let's see, under 4, for the drought preparation, water conservation. We probably should add here something about encouraging residents, some chiming in on some of the programs that we have that are rebates for different green building techniques, low water use toilet and sink fixtures and faucets and things. So I guess that would be
promote residential drought.
It's almost promote the reduction of or the increase of water efficient thick,
Increases in water efficient systems, or we can, I'll work
Yeah.
on putting something in there.
yeah. Because we also have, I mean, 70% of the water is used outside, and the city of Scottsdale already has some resources, very little, but some resources where they'll go out and do a water audit and things like that. But that being expanded would be huge, because it's just that's where most of the water is wasted, is to promote water efficiency
And water
in our
conservation.
buildings. It's really
Definitely.
throughout our structure, our residential and commercial structure. Because we have so much low hanging fruit with that opportunity, and the city's already doing some things. Is how do we maybe help up the game on what we're doing and
Awesome.
save water with that? And then to Tim's, wonderful presentation he just gave, supporting the low impact development and rainwater capture, and it's kind of in sync with, well, that's more new development or remodels, where what I was talking about is existing buildings that are throughout the community that have a lot of water inefficiencies currently that could be improved without a lot of with some thought. And I think Commissioner Johnson has mentioned the turf replacement program that he was enthusiastic about. I mean, there's just a lot of low-hanging fruit around water savings in inside and out, inside our buildings, and also in our landscaping.
Agreed.
I think
And
we're missing out on. Yeah.
And I think that to both of your points, I mean, there are people that are getting it done, and we can definitely work on trying to make certain that we lead the way as opposed to just following. So I applaud that.
And we could even encourage, guys. I think there's only one water auditor right now in the whole city. I mean, if we could encourage a little bit of increase towards some resources, is what really where we put our money is what we care about, in having more water audit available, and possibly other kind of friendly programs that would encourage water conservation. And then under 6, we might want to add a broader item on C that we want to pursue new opportunities to educate and increase awareness with the public. Because right now we talked about our reward and the Earth Day, but there's also lots of other possibilities if we put our mind to it that we could identify. And if appropriate, somehow collaborating, working with, providing input. I know we're sensitive about input to staff, so however the proper wording is with the green team.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be nice to note the green team somewhere in this document, to appropriately interact with Tim. I'm asking you, I guess, whatever be the appropriate way to do that.
Maybe just, excuse me, Chair Lazar and Commissioner Bossy, I would ask Sam what he thinks, but I think that possibly some way of providing some input on things that you think the green team may want to look at a larger scale would be fine. Additionally, Sam can also from time to time come in and update the commission on what the green team is doing. So if maybe one of the things that you're talking about is stewardship, promoting just the green team itself and the activities that they're working on.
So
Thank you.
I maybe identify green team opportunities from time to time, something like that.
I mean, we can definitely put it under support and provide, feedback to the Scottsdale Green Team under goal number 1. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. Does anyone else have anything more that we want to add? Or I'm not saying that you're done, Tammy. If you have some
One-
additional things to do.
One last thing on
Oh,
6.
sorry.
We have opportunity that we could raise awareness of what the city of Scottsdale is already doing. Specifically, like I'm driving traffic to our website, the sustainability website. We're talking about that possibly in the Earth Day committee, because there's a lot of things that we're doing that we should get credit for.
Definitely. Definitely. So raising both environmental awareness as well as
Educating on what we're doing.
Yeah. Sustainability efforts in the city.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Was that it?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. I didn't want, we have limited time here. And I do really want to get to the sustainability plan recommendation letter. But if you all could take a look, I'll go ahead and send this back out draft to everyone. I do want to identify individuals that would like to play, and maybe it's not a lead, but it is somebody who is passionate about these various activities, so that we can identify, people that are continuing on that path. And so realistically, looking at this list and identifying items that you are passionate about, that is your charge for the next meeting, so that we can kind of fill this thing out, and then identifying what the time frame is for some of these. I really don't want it to just not have a due date. There are things here that we shouldn't have all of them be due at the end of the year, and maybe they don't get done, but maybe the work that the committee does or the commission does is due at a certain time. So I really challenge you to take a look at that. I think that Mr. Stockwell had his hand up before you, Tammy.
Yeah.
Chair, members of the commission, I think you're on the right track here, and I raised my hand and lowered it a couple times. I think the thing that I want to be clear on here is that in order to avoid the subcommittee requirement or a subcommittee limitation, the only areas that we can really have people volunteer on is to work with staff on planning events, and there are certainly some events in here. Most of the other matters, since they're things that you might make recommendation on, they really need to be handled by the full commission, and I think you're articulating that well. I just wanted to make that clear because that was a subject that came up last time, and I had communicated to both you and the vice chair about that. If it's, these are the things I'm most interested in, so that staff knows who to work with to make sure that we're covering the subjects at meetings the way you would like us to. I think that's fine. Okay. I just want to be careful about not creating subcommittees inadvertently. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. I will definitely try to phrase it better, interested party or something like that, so that it is definitely somebody's a way of identifying the individuals that are passionate about those particular items. Miss Bossy.
So just a question, do we just submit things to you for?
No, you have to submit everything to staff.
No, I don't, okay. To work on this plan, we can't, okay, just submit it through Tim and he sends it to you, or Sam.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just so that we make certain that, we don't have back and forth.
Okay. So can I clarify with Mr. Stockwell, because in the past, to get anything accomplished, somebody's got to flesh something out in the meantime, right? Typically. And so you're saying and there's supposedly the rule was never talk about to more than 2 commissioners about anything outside of a meeting. Is that no longer the case? I mean, it's just really hamstring. I mean, in trying to do the people's work, there's work that needs to happen.
Chair Crispin Lazar, Commissioner Bossy, members of the commission. You're correctly articulating the limits of the open meeting law, but I think the chair also has a prerogative to kind of state how they would prefer work to be done by the commission. And all I heard her state was that if you could provide your feedback to staff so that they can help coordinate all of that feedback together and work with the chair on helping the commission do their business. That's not really a open meeting law issue. That's more of a chair preference. But
Okay.
I'm just interpreting what I'm hearing.
Well,
here, and the
I
chair
didn't
could
know that,
probably speak for
honestly.
herself.
Sorry, Mr. Stockwell. I was under the impression, though, also that our ability to have things sent directly to me was not, that wasn't something that was available to me. But if there is that as an option, I would like to hear that.
Chair, members of the commission, if any member of the commission wants to send you anything, they can do that. And we just need to make sure that we're not communicating amongst a quorum outside of a commission meeting, a properly agendized commission meeting. And we also need to make sure that we're not having a serial meeting, in that Commissioner Bossy sends something to you and you send something to Vice Chair Coletta, and then Vice Chair Coletta sends something to Commissioner Johnson. Then you have circumvented you've circumvented the open meeting law by having a communication among the quorum. And that's why it doesn't hurt to have, the way I was interpreting what you were saying, it doesn't hurt to have that go to staff and assemble it all together, because staff can pull it all together and communicate back to you all of the input from the commission for a commission meeting. So I hope that's more clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Tammy, do you have something in response to this? Okay.
Yes, that's good. So that's just confirm that's basically how it's always been. And it's just especially for you as you're entering in this role, because it's not that you can't talk to somebody. You just can't have you can't have a meeting of a quorum and make decisions,
Correct.
outside of
Correct.
these meetings. But it's not like there's no conversation ever to
No,
be had.
totally understand.
Yeah. And whether you choose to have it sent to staff or to yourself, it sounds like, if I'm understanding Mr. Stockwell, that's your prerogative in that case. We just can't have this ongoing outside meeting. So just with that, just let me throw 4 more things out there and we'll see how they land. Electric vehicle infrastructure, energy savings, which we've always in the past, worked on with, and the green building, support of the green building program and interaction and promotion of that has always been one of our sort of baseline things that we've worked with. And unless I'm missing, did I miss that? And then energy savings, because we have this new energy, we have the new person working on energy savings within the city. So that would be a very positive thing to have in our list, as well as carbon reduction. I would certainly throw out there for consideration, electric vehicle infrastructure as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
If you could go ahead and summarize those and send them to me, that would be great, because I do really have to move on, and I want to make certain that Mr. Coletta has an opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment. Applauds to you for putting together such a great document. I know there's going to be some edits probably here, but if we're going to use this, I don't know if we need to if we're going to use this as a document going forward. I guess what I'm saying is, do we need to adopt this? Is there a motion we need to make to accept this, or is this just going to be kind of an informal document going forward? Thank you.
I believe that this should be a living document. I understand the premise of having everyone's approval of it, though, and I would I think my intent would be to perhaps at the next meeting have that so that I can incorporate some of these additional items that both Ms. Bossy has indicated, as well as your feedback in terms of items that you are passionate about.
I would say as a response to that, again, if you make the edits and send it to the commission, they have any comments for you and have it ready at the next meeting that we have it on the agenda to make a motion and have it approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on this before we move on to the sustainability plan letter? Because it is 7:30. Then that's what we'll do. If we can go ahead and just put that up on the screen real quick. I did get input. I definitely have some issues with English sometimes. And I think there was one proposed revision on the second paragraph. Mr. Schlosser identified in the first sentence, he would propose that it be revised to read, sustainability plans are foundational strategic documents, comma, which outline the long-term goals that an organization intends to achieve in the realm of sustainability. I think it's a great edit. I don't know if anybody else has any other comment. If anyone else, if you've had any comment on the letter itself, basically, I think that the premise of identifying that we are fully supportive of sustainability planning and making certain that it's a priority. You know, the feedback that I have received, you know, really to you know, if this is important, let's put a due date out there. It may or may not be what is selected, but you know, in just, you know, conversations, you know, regarding what is feasible and what is useful for typical planning purposes. I mean, a year and a half seems like a reasonable first start. So I do think if we want to prioritize this, I would recommend that we, you know, start talking about what a due date is and work towards something. So that was kind of the intent of really saying, seriously, we want you to continue doing this, and we will help out however we can. Mr. Connor, you have your hand up.
Yes, Chair, members of the commission. I would suggest that since we are in contract with the Walton Group, that right now we have a focus on urban heat island effect, which is a component of a sustainability plan. Possibly the best use of the last 2 years of that contract would be to work on a comprehensive sustainability plan, and then be able to have more dialogue with the commission and work through it, all the different issues, and come to agreement with what we end up with. Because I believe this document, if we're really truly making it a sustainability plan, is going to need to then have work with the council and have their approval on top of it. And I see that Mr. Stockwell has his hand up, so I will let him go ahead and continue. Thank you.
Mr. Stockwell.
Chair, members of the commission, I agree 100% with what Tim said. We will be much better prepared to talk about both the sustainability plan and the sustainability indicators when Brian Boyle is ready to present at the March meeting. Chair, as you know, I reached out to you specifically about this item because the council is having their retreat next week, and one of the things that we're asking them is to identify priorities for the next 2 years. And so I thought it might be very timely for the commission to weigh in and identify the sustainability plan as something that should be a priority effort of the city for the next 2 years. I think much of the things that you have talked about in your work plan are items that would fall under a sustainability plan, and I think that the commission and staff is likely in total agreement that, you know, this really should be the top priority, particularly of the next year, to focus on. So I just wanted to add that in, not to belabor the point, but to add the importance of it. And we have certainly been listening to the commission in its discussions and deliberations over the past few years, and we think we're at a good point for this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We definitely appreciate the reach out and the premise of being able to, you know, provide a little bit of input on this matter, and we appreciate all the work that the city is doing. If to Tim's point, you believe that perhaps the timeline is a little aggressive?
Can I?
Yes, Mr. Connor, sorry.
Okay, sure. I do believe it's aggressive. Like I said, we're focused right now on one plan that's different, but it's a component of the plan. And right now, changing horses in the middle of this river is going to be a problematic thing because we have a contract with the scope of work on it for that piece. And I believe that even with the Walton Group, 2 years is going to be a fairly aggressive timeline to get that completed. I think that they have the resources and I think they have the ability to craft a plan with our help and our input. But I would suggest that possibly move that out to another year at least, with the idea that we would have a draft plan by what would be June 30th, 2023. I believe would be it.
And my compromise would be by December 31st of 22. I think if you get it out, then I think that would be good. We've spent some time, Brian and I spent some time looking at this, and we think it's doable, especially if it has a priority effort, both from the commission and staff and the council. Thank you.
So you would recommend the 31st of 22?
Yeah, December 31st of 22.
And if possible, call it a draft plan, because we're going to still need to go through a public outreach period and also have the council weigh in on it and maybe other commissions. So there's that process too, which takes time, which you've witnessed through the general plan process.
Totally understand. Okay, so I have revision, unless somebody else has a comment on the commission. I have a revision of the third sentence of the third paragraph to revise to say the SEAC fully supports these efforts and recommends prioritization of the sustainability plan in the organization strategic plan with a completion date of a draft document no later than December 31st, 2022. Ms.
Okay.
Bossy, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair Lazar. Just a point of clarification. The sustainability plan, is that something that we're going out to the public on, or is that that's an internal? I guess I'd want to clarify that.
I don't think that it is an internal document. It would be something that is public facing.
Well, I mean, of course, everything's public, but I mean, it's not like we go to do a general plan type input process on the sustainability plan. I don't think. I just was responding to Mr. Connor's comment about getting that public comment. Just curious, because that was affecting the timeline. But anyway.
No point. No problem. Mr. Stockwell, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, Chair, members of the commission, I think it's something we definitely need to involve the public on. So I think there's an internal process that we go through. There's a review process that we go through with the commission and council, but there's also a public involvement process, because this is something that would not just guide sustainability efforts of the city. It would also guide sustainability policies that would affect the entire community. So I think you would have to involve the public and the business community as well on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So do I have a motion to accept the letter as correspondence from SEAC, or
so moved?
Discussion?
Your Bossy. So moved with Steve's edits and your edits that you just mentioned with the date.
Mr. Johnson, do you have?
I'll second
you have
that. Thank you.
So we have a motion to accept the edits about the Steve's edits associated with sustainability plans, as well as edits associated with the draft document and the revised due date that was put out by Commissioner Bossy and seconded by
Commissioner Johnson.
Commissioner Johnson. There you go. If we could have a roll call on that.
Certainly. Let me go myself unmuted. Chair Crispin Lazar,
Approved.
Vice Chair Coletta,
Approved.
Commissioner David Abranovich. Is David still on the line? He had
Approved.
joined us. Oh, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Commissioner Bossi,
Approved.
Commissioner Kukulek,
Approved.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
and Commissioner Schlosser.
Approved.
Thank you very
so
much.
much. Thank you so much. We do have a couple more items, but it is getting late. If we can go ahead and make certain that we at least recommend items associated with our discussion for next meeting, I think that we may have to just go ahead and have our staff updates at next meeting, hopefully. I apologize, but I do think that 7:40 is starting to get a little late unless anyone has a burning desire to continue. Mr. Boyle?
Yes, thank you. Just real quick on my update, because I think it's relevant to the topics that you were just discussing in terms of setting the sustainability work plan for your group, as well as the letter, is just some of the pieces that I think that I'll present on, both the indicator and the, I guess we're calling it like initial draft sustainability plan, might also be able to help this group kind of dictate or prioritize items to address as well. So with that, and then the only other thing that I would add in terms of just this discussion around sustainability plan is I think that there needs to be an agreement or deliberation over what is entailed in that plan, because you could certainly set a more ambitious timeline or goals, like sub goals within that, of rolling out strictly a municipal operations sustainability plan in the intermediate time frame prior to that 2 years out. I mean, when you're looking at cities across the board, a lot of cities are creating an individual document focusing in on the municipal operations or within city ownership, and then they're incorporating larger community-wide sustainability strategies either in an additional standalone document or in a climate action plan. So I think that there just needs to be some agreement around that. That's all I have with respect to time. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Mr. Boyle. Mr. Johnson, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks for calling me. We may want to consider a multi-year plan based on what was just said and based on the volume of stuff that we're talking about here. I appreciate the fact that the chair is interested in a one-year plan. I'm fully supportive, but we may want to think about a multi-year plan in that regard. And if there's no other comments, I will move adjournment when the time is right, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. We do have to identify items though for our next meeting. So the ones that I had noted were definitely going to be the discussion of the general plan. If you can make certain that you are prepared to discuss any items that we want to include. Again, at this particular time, I would encourage us to focus so that we can be the most productive on that. And I think we had some discussion of asking Jody to come back, but that doesn't necessarily need to be at next meeting. And then of course, we'll have the annual plan. What else am I missing? Ms. Bossi?
Thank you. Earth Day.
Earth Day update. That would be awesome.
I could just take a moment and just say the last green building was amazing with the gardening. It was
Awesome.
a lot of fun. So
Awesome.
you didn't say it, go to the website and watch it. It was a lot of fun.
Mr. Stockwell, you have your hand up?
Yeah, Chair, just a reminder, we'll have a Cooler Scottsdale update from ASU as well.
Okay.
In addition to Brian Boyle's presentation on indicators in the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. So we definitely have some stuff to talk about. And so I would encourage you to use the time between now and then to formalize some of these things that we've talked about, and we will go ahead and make our meeting next time very productive. Mr. Johnson, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Move to adjourn.
Second that motion.
Is anyone opposed? Then I call the meeting adjourned.
Thanks for a great meeting.
Thank you guys, everyone. That was awesome. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Madam Chair.